This is episode 87 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, DJ McClure. DJ is the VP of Sales and Business Development at National Flood Experts, driving strategic growth through partnerships and tailored cost-saving solutions. National Flood Experts are the number one resource for flood zone solutions nationwide, and really important topic for investors. DJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about this because I think it's kind of like maybe an afterthought to some investors, and it really shouldn't be. We're going to go through a lot of ways that they can figure this out. So I'm excited to help them get through it with your assistance. But when you were younger, did you have interest in real estate at all?
I did, yeah. I bought my first piece of real estate at 25. Did kind of the crowd thing with roommates and did that for a lot of years. Then I moved away, held it as a rental property for a short period, had some bad experience with property management and sold it. And now wish that I'd held on to it a little bit longer, knowing now wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah. Well, so you started out as a house hacker with roommates doing the traditional thing.
Yeah.
So where do you think you ran into problems with property management? Was that there was none available or that you chose the first one?
I think I chose one of the first ones that I interviewed, and I was actually leaving the country. I took a job. I was working in the tennis industry as a tennis professional at the time. And so I was actually moving out of the country to Puerto Rico, and, having a very long distance property management relationship did not go as great as I would have hoped.
Yeah. Did you realize though, at the time, being kind of like new to having a property manager, that you still have to manage the manager? I think that's where a lot of the things go crazy.
That's where it totally went south for me. We had invoices showing up for hundreds of dollars beyond what they were supposed to, and with no conversation. And come to find out, this particular property manager was one strike away from losing her license. So yeah, we pulled the ejection cord and sold it, much, much earlier than, I wish that I would have.
Do you think that, when you first start getting wind of it and then learning how people found you, I feel like flood is something that people are just scared of. They just consider it as like, oh, well, you know what, just forget it. And you guys are really able to provide at least one, more transparency on it, and then a lot of different solutions out there for long-term and short-term options.
Yeah, it's very much taking a disruptor mindset, to the real estate market, because, what I learned really early on, my first 6 months, is that a lot of people don't like flood insurance. Like, we're talking insurance professionals in general, they just don't like it. It's not interesting. It's very complicated. And then real estate investors, just the same, they don't like it, but they will accept it. And they take the lender's word as just written in blood, basically, that, look, they say I got to have flood insurance, so I have to have it. And it kind of just gets, set on renewal. And there's not always as much, deep diving into it as what we're doing. So it's fun to be on the surface of something.
Yeah, it can be a humongous value add to either remove or reduce a flood premium. And that's something that I agree with you. I don't think people think about, like you said, they just take the lender. Oh, well, they require flood insurance. Okay, I'll just pay, $4,300 a year. The one way that I learned about it early in my on-market career is I was doing a deal, and there was like part of the property was in the flood. It was like one of those garage zones. And we ended up challenging it some, and it got out. And I was like, wow. But I don't know that I really kept paying attention to that. And this is exactly what you're talking about. There's huge benefits in there. Why do you think it is that investors just take the word for it? Is it because it's such a niche thing and it's hard to figure out who to go to get an answer?
There's just so many things to pay attention to when you're buying a deal, and the flood's just one variable of 1,000 others that you're trying to really do due diligence on and evaluate. And so a lot of people just say, forget it, I'm not going to look at a flood zone, they just walk away.
Yeah.
Or they go through the process, their broker, they accept whatever that cost is going to be in the underwriting, and they just work around it. and then they never really think about it again. That's a pretty
Right.
common thing. We meet a lot of investors that are 2, 3 years or more into their property, and they're like, wow, I had no idea some of these solutions existed. Wish I'd known when I was going through the buying process.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, maybe it looks like a good deal because it's like a, a quote, a flood deal. And then the flood premiums are worked into the spreadsheet, it pencils, everything looks good. So like you said, they're like, well, that's just operating costs now.
Right.
So what's the first indicator to someone that there may be something they can do about a flood premium, or should everybody be checking it to make sure?
Honestly, it's really everybody. There's not really any, fail-safe criteria. I say anyone that has a property, whether they've owned it for however many years or they're looking at buying one, you should just give it kind of an open mind look, um, because you don't know what's going to be below the surface. There's like literally so many different things that can lead to a cost savings, whether it's looking at the way the policy is structured, looking at different options, looking at the flood zone. Um, Interestingly enough, flood insurance is the only insurance that you can actually assume ownership from the seller, and a lot of people don't know that. A lot of
Of the
insurance brokers
policy.
actually don't know that you can do that too. So if the owner has a favorable price point, now it has to be with NFIP. Doesn't
Okay.
necessarily work for the private markets, unfortunately. But what's happened is that there's been an evolution in FEMA's insurance program over the last few years, and so there's still some of the, let's call it legacy policy pricing that's out there. And if so, someone's paying, let's say, 1,500 for an apartment building. You may run a brand new quote. That same building might be 10,000. But if you're able to assume the policy from the seller, now you're starting day one at 1,500, and of course you're going to increase every year, but not nearly at
Right.
the trajectory of starting at 10,000.
Let's talk geography first in terms of the flood zones. Obviously, if you see one and it's close to being outside, that's a maybe a better indicator that you may have more options there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think just getting some visibility on the flood map, right? And we teach all our investor clients to make pulling the flood zone, part of your due diligence process. I mean, it's pretty simple. You can go to FEMA's, mapping website, throw in the address, and it's pretty visibly obvious. The blue
Yeah.
area is the 100-year flood zone. And it's real simple. If it's touching even a small piece of a building, the lenders have a legal compliance that they have to pass on to you, that flood insurance will be required for that building. So it really starts as simply as that. We see a lot of multifamily properties where, out of 20 buildings, there may only be 5 that the flood zone is
Oh,
touching. And
yeah.
like, how does that make sense, right? Water didn't just stop. Um, in topography, right? The world's not flat. So you have to just kind of question it and go a little deeper. And that's where, some of the fun, solutions really exist.
Yeah, and I think people also get this thing in their head that flood zone means every property floods, which obviously is not true because there's property not in flood zones that
Mhm.
flood, properties in flood zones where you may never flood, but they're hedging their bets based on topography and everything like that. That's why the insurance exists, right?
Yeah, I mean, the flood zones are created and maintained by the local counties around the country, right? So, yeah, FEMA does oversee at the final national level, but each individual county is, managing and updating their maps. Some are every 10 years, some are even more 15 to 20 years, right? So by the time a new flood map comes out, they're using data from several years past. And development, real estate construction, all those things move way faster. So you have to really just understand the requirements and then take the steps necessary to see, what can be done potentially if the data allows you to then maybe get the lender requirement removed, or, perhaps have a better policy.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the question I know people want to hear, and we talked about it quickly just in the pre-call. Is climate change now affecting the kind of the whole area of flood now more than it was before in terms of insurance setting for investors?
Definitely on the property side, right? Everyone that's buying a property right now or owns a property has seen massive increases on the property side. All the property carriers are private, right? So they dictate their own, you know, criteria of what they will and won't insure. Now through FEMA's program, it's a little bit different. Pretty much anybody can get a policy through FEMA. There's few criteria where they'll exclude you. But what they've done, FEMA introduced their risk rating 2.0 evolution of the insurance system. And what they did is they essentially used a similar mindset to the private market where it's a little more subjective. Certain areas of the country have had more claims. Certain areas of the country have a higher saturation of policies. So they tried to spread around a little bit. Certain areas of the country are now more expensive than they used to be. Whereas in the past, there was a very predictable criteria to the way they priced the FEMA insurance policies. I mean, think of just like this big spreadsheet of scenarios. Even for the low risk flood zones, there used to be standard pricing. Well, now they don't use the flood zone as a multiplier anymore in the FEMA policies. And so there's a little more subjectivity in at least the perception of the way it looks. So yeah, some of the areas of the country are definitely getting a little more penalized than others.